Russia, in this case, reminds me of Russia's interests in Syria, which are not national and critical interests for Russia. They merely offer them an opportunity to meddle, to be bigger than they are on the world stage, and to seem to matter more than they really do, from my point of view. In this case, I believe they're trying to exploit a complex situation in the Korean Peninsula, and we'll see it work out.
So when the South Korean president, nominally an incredibly close ally of America, meets Vladimir Putin and asks him to play a bigger role, how does that go down in Washington?
Well, I think Putin's going to advise South Korea to give North Korea more than the U.S. is willing to give North Korea. In other words, to capitulate little by little as a matter of momentum toward eventually succumbing to a North Korean presence on the entire Korean Peninsula.
And when Vladimir Putin says that sanctions don't work because the North Koreans would rather eat grass than abandon their nuclear program, in a grim kind of way, that's quite a good analysis of the situation, isn't it?
Well, sanctions don't work in North Korea because there is no economy in North Korea. It's a zombie state. It's kept alive merely by the benevolence of sorts of the USSR up until 1991 when it dissolved. And subsequently, China moved into that vacuum and is responsible for the sustenance of this zombie state. So in this case, secondary sanctions have to come into play. And secondary sanctions target third parties who enable the situation to go forward. And in this case, the biggest target would be China and its oil sales and trade and purchases from North Korea, which enable North Korea to maintain what we think of as an economy, but which isn't really.
And is there any threat to China from this situation? How does China be moved into taking a more active part?
It's going to be active in the sense that it wishes to answer any U.S. efforts that might appear to contain China's growing power. It does not want the U.S. footprint any larger than it is. And the U.S.'s interest in containing China's growing power is the thing that keeps China awake at night. To the extent that this marginalizes somehow the U.S. presence, it might push them off into the Pacific further. It might force a removal or withdrawal of U.S. military presence in South Korea. There are 28,000 troops. To that extent, it's wonderful for China. They claim, oh dear, we're going to have refugees flooding our country. No, they're really concerned about the U.S. and the South moving north into a vacuum of a failed, collapsed state which can't sustain itself. That's their biggest fear.
And where does this leave the UN, therefore, the arena that is supposed to exist to contain a rogue state? Part of the problem would seem to be that China and Russia actually don't see North Korea as a rogue state. They see it as a useful stick with which to tease and beat the Americans.
Unfortunately, the UN right now is basically a stage for bilateral face-offs right now between the U.S. and North Korea. And unfortunately, North Korea has called this narrative, and we're unfortunately agreeing that that's the narrative, that the UN is merely the backdrop for a bilateral feud that elevates North Korea unduly alongside the world's most powerful country. I believe that the UN should speak with one voice. Many other countries within the UN should come to the table with ideas and create a collective voice where they can have some sort of a sit-down intervention with North Korea, and it's not merely a U.S.-North Korea scenario.